Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kim Marie. How many of you are familiar with the Jeffrey Wolf Green method of evolutionary astrology? We have a show of hands. Okay. All right. I will try and be informative and give you any little background or explanations that you need along the way. Always welcome for questions if you have them. This is going to be a little bit more of a philosophical talk. Plan to give you information though. I originally thought I could get through Pluto Aquarius transiting the 12 houses, and I'm like, oh, Kim Marie, we're going to be here a long time. That's not going to work. So I have been studying the Jeffrey Wolf Green method for 40 years. I found it June of 1985. Jeffrey was the first person I ever had an astrology reading with. And this was back in the days of typewriters and cassette tapes, that those wizened astrologers that Stormy Grace was talking about. I'm one of those. So, and one more little piece of background information for you in case, evolutionary astrology works with Pluto as representative of the soul. So by sign, that's the generation you were born into, and the polarity point are the generational lessons. Wherever Pluto is natally by house in your chart is your own individual soul, and then typically polarity point, your lessons. There are variations. Example, in case you want to know, according to this subject today, Pluto and Aquarius effect on sexuality. I have Pluto in the 8th house natally, which means that I am a Scorpio 8th house soul, Pluto, Scorpio soul, early Pluto Virgo generation for anybody who cares to know. A lot of Scorpio in my chart as well. So this has been something that has been of interest to me for a long period of time. We're going to start out with some philosophy, as I said, and then we're going to move into some examples by evolutionary states of consciousness. That slide's going to come a little more to the end. So I'm just going to also briefly say to those of you who are new to Jeffrey Green's method, we look at souls going through lifetimes of experience, expanding in consciousness. And that is not known by the chart. You have to observe and correlate, observe and correlate. And so over time, lots of observing in EA, approximately 7 out of 10 souls are in what we call consensus state. They do not think outside the space-time they were born into. If somebody tells them astrology is the work of the devil, most of them will just take it in. Eventually, we start expanding into what's known as the individuated state. That's approximately 2 out of 10 souls on the planet. This is where we are learning to say, I'm going to think for myself. What do I believe? What do I think? How do I be me outside of consensus conditionings? And then eventually we move into that spirituated state, as we call it. That is approximately 1 out of 10 souls on the planet, any race, any country, etc. These are souls that are expanding and understanding timeless, universal spiritual principles, the mystical side of any consensus religion, so to speak. And so we'll work with this a little further on when I give you some examples of Pluto and Aquarius through those states of consciousness. But I just want a brief explanation of that because I will speak to it as we are moving along here, okay? So in a general sense, the active polarity is energy moving out. They are generally non-monogamous, and I'm going to say, I've got to change that word. It is typically non-monogamous because it is exploring sexuality. The passive polarity is energy moving back to the center. And so that is committing in sexuality. All right. And so this active passive polarity goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You must look at the entire chart to understand where any sexual proclivities are coming from. So don't take this as, totally gospel because you have sun in a fire sign. and you're going to be non-monogamous. No, it's the whole chart. Okay. But this gives you a general idea with how energy wants to flow on a sexual level. The sexual instinct originates from the primary brain, the medulla oblongata, that we've had for hundreds of thousands of years. And it is the survival instinct because sexuality procreates the species. So we all naturally have that sexual instinct within us, even in our spirituated states of consciousness. Approximately 95% of species, or those that have their vertebrae, are two sexes, male and female. And the reason for this is because it creates an evolution of the immune system and it allows that species to survive. Now, there is a variation, not just in humans, all right? But you can be born with both genders in one body. I had a volunteer at NORWAC tell me that nowadays we call that intersex. We no longer call it hermaphroditic, whatever. I don't always pronounce words correctly. And so example of that, did anybody see the movie Conclave? Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna put the spoiler out there, but I already gave it away, okay? So on a historic level, and again, this is going over long periods of times, not just tens of thousands of years, but hundreds of thousands of years that we as ancient humans or ancient humanoids have been on this, the planet. We historically are non-monogamous. And again, it's for those survival reasons. We wanted to diversify the gene pool and allow us to survive. There are some species in nature, for instance, eagles and wolves. Hey, is anybody watching Sunny and Gizmo? Oh gosh, okay. I'm a nature lover. Friends of Big Bear Valley. Friends of Big Bear Valley on Facebook. They have an eagle cam. I've watched it for 3 years. This is the first time in 3 years that Sunny and Shadow had eaglets, and they're just about ready to fledge. And so I've been watching every day while I'm out here to see if one of them is going to leave the nest. But eagles are naturally monogamous. So one of the things that we question in evolutionary astrology, are we reaching a point, we got enough humans on the planet now, where maybe we need our own quality control as a species? Could we possibly be moving towards monogamy ourselves as a species? 40 years ago, Jeffrey would say, that's going to be a question for all of you to decide. We're still trying to decide it. Again, we're looking at things from a very long period of time. Patriarchal distortions, familiar with that word? Everybody comfortable with that word? Whew, we figured, we've really had it pretty consciously on the planet for the last 5,000 to 7,000 years. And it's created all kinds of religious and social and cultural distortions. And what are one of the biggest things that religion does? It wants to suppress sexuality. And it comes up with all kinds of human-made distortions. You must be monogamous. If you're a Catholic priest, you can no longer have sex, etc., etc. And so we, all of us, live in consensus societies, okay, that approximately 70%, they do still make the rules and the laws. Just look around you right now today. And so we have to live within those societies. However, I really do think that Pluto and Aquarius is going to really blow things up sexually. When we try to suppress natural law, and that includes natural sexuality, it comes out distorted. All you've got to do is look around you and see in its extremes, the sexual violence that we see going on all over the planet for everybody. But it can be as simple as gender inequality. It can be how we have in the US, our various states and our national laws that, try to make us all conform to these human-made distortions of interpretation. Well, how many of you just know that Pluto likes to blow things up? Plutonium, put it in Aquarius, and I'll speak from the Capricorn to Aquarius transit in a few slides here. That's going to be the biggest thing we have to be ready for. For those of us who are US citizens, welcome. Anybody who's international, welcome. Here, for those of us in the US, the July 4th, 1776 chart, no matter what time you use, has a south node at about 6 degrees Aquarius. On a collective level for a country's chart, that south node is the collective emotional psyche that we all carry within us. And Pluto is going to go over that 6 degree south node next year, 2026, the USA midterms. I have always thought that this is going to be the start of the rebellions, not just sexually. It's just going to start coming out all over the place. But we will also see it on a state level, on a collective level, as part of the rebellions as well. I'll get more into this. Garden of Eden myth, just really briefly on this. Eve was always portrayed as the temptation, the sins of flesh. Adam was, the spiritual wise one, and Eve is responsible for tempting him into his downfall, which was going into the senses and sexuality, trying to separate spirit and flesh, when in natural law, they're two sides of the same coin. It all exists together. In EA, again, we say you can't go off into the monastery convent and pray yourself perfect. Catholic priests molest, okay? Tibetan monks smoke cigarettes. So we've got to go through it lifetime after lifetime in that natural way. So this is original basis. And even your Eastern philosophies all have this Garden of Eden myth in their religions. So what it's created is the male or animus energy having power over the female anima energy. The distortions of the animus is what we call the victor or the sadist. Guilt based upon anger. How dare they make me feel bad? I'm going to get them. Then you have the distorted anima, which is the victim or the masochist, and it's guilt based upon atonement. I must suffer. I deserve this. These distortions work broader than male and female. And these are more well known in the Virgo Pisces polarity in evolutionary astrology. Virgo can be both the sadist and the masochist. Pisces can be both the sadist and masochist. So sadomasochism stems directly from your human-made religions and sexual distortions. And tell me if I need to slow down any. Human-made religions. What we have is God is male, God is outside of us judging us, God is perfect. Why would something perfect create this mess? Natural spiritual principles, observe, correlate. Universal source is an energetic force beyond gender. It is everywhere, inside, outside. We know it out there to the degree we know it in here, and to the degree we sense it. Those senses again. The emotions, the physical body, the intuition. And universal source is an evolving force. It's a co-creative process. Every time you evolve one baby step forward, source itself evolves. Make sense? Question?
Yes, we have a question from Zoom. I'm new to evolutionary astrology. Can you answer for me whether or not a belief in reincarnation is kind of inherent in the practice? It seems like it is, but I just thought I'd better.
Good question. Yes, Zoom. Evolutionary astrology comes from the premise of reincarnation. And our joke is, if I only get one life, I want the silver spoon. So, yes. And it's also then through this process of reincarnation and expanding consciousness, we don't come in just blind. That chart, that is your chart. It's unique to you and where you are at, specific to your evolutionary process. The other thing about evolutionary astrology is we dislike good, bad. We dislike right, wrong. any of the 12 archetypes can be distorted or naturally expressed. Okay? So all souls have a dual desire nature, a desire to separate from that which created us, a desire to incarnate, the lover, the car, the job, the kids, etc. We go through countless lifetimes exhausting those separating desires. Eventually, the desire to return, to know that which created us, starts to become stronger and stronger. Eventually, it's the only desire left. So in that dual desire nature, the sexual desire is one of the very last desires we exhaust. Again, procreation of the species. Only approximately 2% of us have naturally exhausted that. Now, we can go through time periods of celibacy, usually lessons of self-reliance. Okay? But to then just, again, with our human-made religions, oh, I'm beyond all that. And then the scandal comes out. So that expansion of consciousness also evolves from what we would call profane sexuality to sacred sexuality. I use the word profane very, very broadly. It can be your consensus consciousness in a religion that says the only way you can do this is to procreate. It can be distorted into pornography. But eventually, we start to recognize that it's more than just a physical act. It involves our emotions, our mind, our spirit, our entire soul. And that moves along with that expansion from consensus, individuating, spirituating. In that process, many species, not just humans, go through all kinds of sexual variations and experimentations. Talk about that a little more in just a moment with Pluto just leaving Capricorn. Pluto and Capricorn really brought this whole issue of sexual freedom and variation out into public consciousness. And necessarily so, even though consensus is trying to push it back down, Aquarius is not going to let them do it. Not going to be able to. I am an animal lover, and I have always had cats. And I have a tendency to just get one species of cats, usually male, just varies. Have you ever heard cats mate? And I've had male cats, and there's always going to be an alpha, and he's always going to tell the other boys, guys, I'm going to play. Give you an example. Okay. So it's not just limited to humans of going through this. You see on your screen here, I did a little bit of research, and probably 4 or 5 different studies. I didn't put them in here, but they're estimating that currently about 5 to 9% of our human population belongs into the LGBTQ world. Okay. As we expand in consciousness, we eventually come to the point where the two genders, the male and the female, reach that commitment to expand the sacred sexuality, balancing the anima animus. More on that. Another question, Ryan?
Yep. What is the evidence that expanding consciousness equal two gender relationships? Do you mean gender or sex?
Two gender, by two gender, I mean the two sexes, the male and the female of a sex. Okay. And most of it comes down to basically it comes down to the fact that because we split ourselves into two genders to evolve and survive our species, those two genders have to come together, and they move into what we eventually call androgyny. That's where we are releasing the exhaustion of the sexual desires. Make sense? Question?
So yeah, I want to clarify too with the question that was just asked, as opposed to gender versus sexes, right? Because they are different concepts.
Yes.
So could this gender thing happen within one soul? Because you know, you could have like an active and passive person like within one body. So then how is it, do you know what I'm saying, within like this sex thing that you're talking about? Yeah. Okay, okay.
Answer your question? Sarah? More to it?
So will you just answer it yourself? Like, yeah,
Yes.
with words?
Yes,
please?
yes. And I have another slide that's going to come right after that. When we are souls expanding in consciousness, eventually, whatever gender we are, for me as a female, I have to balance my inner male and my inner female. I have to carry that within me. Okay. And eventually, so here's another way, and I didn't forget somebody else's question. Here's another way to look at it. Okay. I got a couple slides coming up here that's going to bring that to us. I might wait, see if it's my next slide. It could easily be my next slide. Before I go on, question in here. Masha, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. So, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've looked at evolutionary astrology. It's modern rulerships of the planets,
Yes.
correct? So Aquarius would be ruled by Uranus.
Yes.
So, and with respect to that, what is this relationship between Saturn and Uranus being, you know, neighbors in the zodiac? And how is it that Saturn and Capricorn kind of paves the way to the more Uranian Aquarius qualities?
Okay, let me see if I understand your question correctly. What's the relationship between the Saturn Uranus archetype or the Capricorn Aquarius archetype, correct?
Yes.
Evolutionary astrology looks at the planet, the sign, and the house as one archetype.
Okay.
Learn the 12 archetypes. You can know the planets, you can know the houses, you can know the signs. Okay. So what the interface between them is Saturn is the individuated consciousness, what we all know, the boundaries of our consciousness. Uranus is the individuated unconsciousness, past, present, future. And I got a slide on that coming up. Saturn wants to suppress, conform. Uranus wants to rebel. So they're a unique planetary pair, and that they're always going back and forth with each other. That help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? So just a moment on natural selection. Then we're going to go back to that anima animus that I was talking about, that I have more to say. In natural law, attraction is determined by the scent, the pheromones. Those are ruled, by the way, by Taurus. Taurus rules the Venus, the inner side of Venus, Taurus, second house, rules the five senses. And what we do today in our modern societies is we cover it all up. You know, who wears, I wear oils, okay? I love them. But what it does when we cover up that ability to get that natural scent of somebody else, we have a tendency to choose repulsive, using that word broadly, we choose repulsive partners and increase our karma, because the sexual fluids, when you exchange sexual fluids with someone, you exchange karma. It's a mutual osmosis. You can't see that bottom line. It's a mutual osmosis of another person's karmic, genetic, evolutionary background. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain what you mean by increasing karma, please?
Well, I have a tendency to say love at first sight, instant attraction, caution, red flag, there may be some karma there. So how many times, how many of you, myself included, earlier in your life, got in a relationship that you knew wasn't good for you, but you overrode your natural instincts and you went forward in that relationship for a period of time? You were with somebody long past healing the karma, and you maybe increased the karma because you made an incorrect choice for what you needed as a partner. Okay, so another way to look at this, okay, you know, Aquarius is known as friends. Leo's known as lovers. They both square Scorpio, that commitment. In natural law, Aquarian friends become Leo lovers. And when the love lessons are done, they go back to Aquarian friendship. How many of us can do that in our relationships today? Especially the young ones, the Pluto Libras and Pluto Scorpios, and they're on social media and you're like, oh, this is TMI. This is way oversharing, you know? And so, you know, just further example for you. Make sense? Good with that? And so again, that sense of smell, and I say this constantly to the Pluto and Scorpio generations. Now let me show you the next slide. The natural order of selecting a mate, companionship, friendship, intimacy, in that order. And I tell these younger generations, you can save yourself so much, you know, trouble, and you can actually be healing karma rather than increasing it or creating it. So companionship, the activity is more important than the person. Do we share similar beliefs and values? Are they compatible enough? Then it flips to friendship, and the person becomes more important than the activity. We learn compromise. We learn mutual giving and receiving. My joke is my husband learned astrology. I can follow baseball and football. Didn't before the relationship, but we share similar beliefs and values, very similar. So in that phase, when we're working with this companionship, friendship phase right here, this is when you check out the hormones, hiking, hugging, dancing. You notice I did not include sex? Yes. Repulsive smell, not so good karma, clean it up, move on. I've actually experienced that in the dating game many moons ago. Attractive smell, fairly good karma, move forward. Neutral smell, free choice. Make sense? Kim Marie, what's your favorite phrase? Make sense? Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think getting back to the karma issue, as we look back, at least I can relate in a relationship that in the beginning we're not really sure of, but it's really positive, there's good attraction, and then we find certain things are not jiving and there's a potential for something negative, maybe something assaultive or physically violent. As we look back, we may find that, yes, this was part of our growth and it was worthwhile. It's like we were meant to experience it, even though, you know, we're no longer close or friends, perhaps.
Yes.
And it seems like that's a part of it. So sometimes it seems like, especially if it's not love at first sight, it may take time to work through it and see where it goes.
Yes. Yes. It's not always just the instant attraction, love at first sight. That doesn't automatically mean bad partner. Just like you can meet somebody and have, like you said, it's evolution, really. You know, okay, we came together for this point in time and it worked, and now it doesn't work anymore. That natural Y in the road. Okay. All right, anima, animus. Let's look at this just a little bit more. Soul evolution, and I didn't remember that my transcript was going to show up, but I can usually remember what I wrote. Soul evolution is balancing the anima, animus, regardless of gender. Okay, so that expansion in consciousness of the souls. Here's what I was going to say a little earlier. What tends to happen is, and this is, you know, more consensus at approximately 70%, but it can be individuated as well. What happens for most of our souls is we get comfortable in a certain gender. And so when we've ran out of the evolutionary lessons in that gender and we flip over, it can be very uncomfortable the first lifetime or two. And the example that Jeffrey Wolf Green would give is you buy a new pair of blue jeans and they're very uncomfortable the first time or two you wear them. You got to wash and wear and wash and wear, and pretty soon they become your favorite gender or favorite pair of blue jeans. And then eventually they're so threadbare, you got to go get a new pair of jeans. That's what we can have a tendency to do. As we expand in consciousness on a soul level and we're balancing that anima animus, we can flip lifetime to lifetime. I do a lot of past regression work. I'm in the deep memory processing by Roger Wolger, Pat Walsh. My last life I was female. The lifetime before that I was male, and the lifetime before that I was male. So I've got that history in me. So we get to the point where we can go back and forth easier and easier. And again, that's that androgyny. All right. So the reason that I'm bringing this up for you is that anima animus exists in the Cancer Capricorn polarity. We've just had 15 years of Pluto and Capricorn. Can you see why on the planet we've had all these gender issues come up? All of us in this room have lived through Pluto transiting Capricorn. Take a moment and reflect. How has your inner anima animus changed? How has your outer changed? Who decided that instead of being hetero, they wanted to have a relationship, they got attracted to somebody their same gender? And vice versa. And all kinds of variations in between. Now, Capricorn, as we talked earlier, because it is that consensus, Saturn Capricorn is more or less relating to that consensus consciousness. Not everybody. I got a lot of Capricorn in my chart. Individuated is Uranian Aquarius, and spirituated is Neptune Pisces, broad-based. Okay. And so all of us through this Pluto and Capricorn transit, we've had to deal with our inner and outer anima animus in some way. Capricorn has wanted to suppress it. Society says we cannot have any of this LGBTQ and everything else. And yet the soul is wanting to evolve, and it wants to bust out of the Capricorn restrictions. And that's what we saw happen with this. Now, Masha?
How does Neptune and Capricorn generation play into this? Because my generation was born with Neptune, Uranus conjoined actually in Capricorn.
That mini generation of Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn, late 90s, right?
Yeah, mid-90s, yeah.
Mid-90s. That generation of souls have all kinds of past life conditioning to conform, not just with sexuality, okay, but with religion, with society, with how they function. I have to be what they tell me to be. A lot of you guys that have Uranus, Neptune, and Capricorn have Pluto and Scorpio. And that's going, nope, not going to do that. You're busting out of those Capricorn restrictions, really. And the other, another little side thing on that is, especially the Neptune and Capricorn generation, they come in with idealism, Neptune's idealism. They come in with idealism in which they think everybody else is going to be fair and equal with resources, and fair and equal with how we treat the genders. And they go through the Neptunian disillusionments with that. And hopefully Uranus wants to then kick a little butt and go, nope, not going to go with that one anymore. And so, you know, this is why we have this Pluto and Capricorn backlash that has been trying to, you know, bring all that conformity and suppression back in, and it's not working. So Pluto in Aquarius, couple of little thoughts here on Aquarius in general. Remember, Uranus Aquarius 11th house rules the individuated unconsciousness. It contains the past in all its detail, every lifetime we've lived. It's what you access with hypnotherapy, past life regression, etc. It contains everything that Saturn wants to push down below in the present, okay? And it contains blueprints of the future. clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. If the future orientated message comes up once or twice, maybe fantasy, wishful thinking, way down the road, 10, 15 years. If the future orientated message comes up of its own volition, again, it's where your own soul is trying to get you to go. And sometimes it's very hard to do that Aquarian rebellion and break free from your own conformities that you've set up. We also have, on an individual and a societal basis, 3 reactions to change. Now, this is more or less, those thirds will ebb and flow on collective levels, okay? But we'll have 1/3 that wants to maintain the past, go back to that Saturn or that Pluto and Capricorn. We'll have a third that wants to race into the future, the Uranian rebel. And then we have those that are kind of in the middle, and they just kind of go with whatever the latest fad is or what's out there in social media. You know, they kind of sway back and forth. This third right here, they're the ones that kind of decide whether we're going to go forward or back, depending on how they're going to flow, you know, along with that. This is one of the reasons why evolution takes so long. We all have a desire to be secure. It's hard to go into an unknown future. It's hard to be a Uranian rebel. There are those of us who are, all the way to anarchy. Aquarius rules trauma. This is going to be the biggie with Pluto and Aquarius. Trauma is any intense event that shocks our psyche. And it can be physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. We've all had traumatic things happen in our life. We all carry trauma from past lives. With the patriarchal distortions, anybody in the room think they do not carry sexual trauma? We all do. We all do. And because Pluto, you know, with its death and rebirth, Pluto wanting to really create, you know, the metamorphosis, it's going to have all kinds of messaging coming up in our own individuated consciousness. We're all going to have spontaneous memories, spontaneous dreams, spontaneous flashbacks earlier in this life. You know, I remember I was in the shower once and I had a spontaneous memory, and all of a sudden I'm on my knees bawling in the shower. I won't tell you the memory. It wasn't sexual. But you get the point. So we're going to have all that stuff from the past, all that stuff from the suppressed present that I don't want to look at, don't want to deal with. All that's going to come up. And I'll give you some clues on how to work with it. But what will also come about with Pluto and Aquarius for us is we're going to create new technologies and techniques with sexual healing. PTSD, you know how common that word is now? It was not that common 50 years ago. It wasn't in, you know, diagnosing until the last 20, 30 years. And so we're going to come up with different types of technologies and techniques to heal PTSD on sexual levels. One that I've been involved with, I mentioned it just a moment ago, deep memory processing. It's a past life regression therapy developed by a Jungian therapist, Roger Wolger. Love that method. So go ahead, question.
I'm just curious how we have connected trauma and associated that with Aquarius, since I feel like I've heard Pluto more associated with the trauma aspect of
good question. Good question. Pluto rules Scorpio, 8th house. Taurus is self-sex. Scorpio is shared sex. Okay. So Pluto has rulership of sexuality on an ultimate soul level. And because of distortions on the planet, Pluto gets distorted. It distorts by generation. It creates its own trauma, including sexual trauma. So it can come from both archetypes. Does that help?
Yeah.
Explain? Okay. Yeah. Good question though, because that's a real a good one, because you know Pluto, again, all 12 archetypes can be distorted. All 12 archetypes can carry trauma. We know that from looking at our charts. General rulership of trauma is Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house. And it's because Uranus rules the individuated unconsciousness. We've all heard Uranus, Neptune, Pluto rule the unconscious. Saturn, boundary consciousness. Uranus, boundary unconsciousness. And that's where that's contained. That's how Aquarius gets that. Okay, Masha?
Hi, so I've always understood Pluto as, the underworld of awareness, right? So like you're saying, it's unconscious, but it's specifically like the darker realms of the underworld, the sewage, some of the things that might be more uncomfortable to face, but nonetheless are things we have to go through in the context of the hero's journey in order to overcome and get through to the other side, which would be, like enlightenment, quote unquote. So
Yes.
with Aquarius, being second to last of the zodiac, in the collective scheme of things, is this kind of like the underworld journey of the collective that we're moving through to complete this cycle of consciousness expansion and full complete spiritualization as part of the zodiac?
Yeah, good one. Good one, yes. And just in case anybody couldn't hear it, okay, as you know, Pluto gets loosely called the underworld, and it brings up all the yuck on the hero's journey and on its way to its own enlightenment. And it's, again, including that sexual enlightenment, Tantra, Kundalini, we'll get to that. And so, yes, that is all part of that grand process that Pluto goes through on its own. And Pluto can go through it just working its way through the zodiac. And each of those signs over its long periods will bring up the ugliness of that archetype that Pluto does on its way to that archetype, creating its hero or its natural expression, as I like to say.
Okay.
Help?
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah, Uranus is like a lightning strike of awareness.
Mhm.
So is that from the past or the future? Those are
All of the above.
Yeah.
All of the above. That's the we all have our individuated unconsciousness. We all get those lightning bolts. And those lightning bolts can be a flashback of a past life that comes into consciousness, something that happened to you at 2 years old, sex talk, or it can be, again, your own vision of the future. That's the broader interpretation of that lightning bolt.
When she said like Pluto's gonna bring it out and then we're gonna look at it and heal it.
Exactly. And while in general, Pluto and Aquarius is going to be the rebel. Remember that 1/3 of Aquarius that wants to go back to the Saturnian past? As we move through this transit, it's going to freak out the consensus state, and they're going to try their darndest to just take those sexuality laws, and I include all the gender stuff in there, and just try and conform. I never watched The Handmaid's Tale. It's just like, nope, don't want to go there. Vernon.
Make America great again.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I think I think most of us probably have the same filter here today when it comes to US policy. So as you can see on your screen here, because Aquarius is an air sign and all the air signs carry that duality, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius is going to naturally increase sexual curiosity in general and bisexual curiosity. It can come out of the closet even more. It's always existed.
Why are air signs dualistic?
I think to me, how I would explain it is we see it as dualistic, but if you just look at air, it moves. Whereas the earth is more or less solid unless we get an earthquake, and water always has to have its container. So
But
that
isn't Aquarius that fixed sign? So I guess I'm.
it's fixed air. You're correct. You're correct. For those of you who are, beginners, Aquarius is the fixed modality of air. But it's still, so the way you see fixed air move through Aquarius is that duality of the air, of the mind, it holds it until it can't anymore. And poof, we have that Uranian moment and we flip over to another air mind perspective. Okay, so that's how it works in a fixed level. So as you can see on your screen, the non-monogamy thruples, that's 3, polyamory, sexual gender freedoms, all of that stuff will come out. And it's going to come out from those screens I showed you at the very beginning. We are historically non-monogamous, and we are naturally sexual beings. Okay, so Pluto and Aquarius is going to bring it out in all kinds of ways. And if you live in the US, and Pluto and Aquarius, well, it's gonna make its waning inconjuncts to the Cancer planets, which is still going to make it uncomfortable for society. But I think the rebellions are still going to have pretty much the last word. You can see on your screen here the distortions. One of the things that's really going to happen with Pluto and Aquarius is what we call cyber sex. We don't do it physically anymore. We do it over our devices. Or as we move into the AI robotic world, you already know it's out there. The blow up dolls or, whatever they are, we're really going to see that. The sadomasochism, the S&M, that's still going to be here in that consensus world. We could see this stuff get worse. And exhibitionism, voyeurism, pornography, laws punishing sexuality is what's on the bottom. We're not going to have a instantaneous enlightenment because Pluto changed signs. We're still going to have the distortions. We're still going to have broadly an evolution of the natural expression. And the natural expression is sexual freedom. And within that sexual freedom, we can still have deeply committed relationships with all kinds of gender variations. Okay, makes sense? Keep wanting to hit the laptop and I have to stop myself.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand, like early in the beginning of the lecture, you started with saying, what I understood as expansion and contraction is this inherent aspect of universal order and chaos, right? So that nature.
Active passive polarity.
Active passive polarity. And then here, Uranus is all about like blowing things up into little pieces. So we're kind of seeing that with like, all these different distortions that you're seeing. But then you're also talking about androgyny and how like, the collective consciousness is basically like one homogeneous soup.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how does, I'm sorry, at the same time, in ecology, we see that the healthiest ecosystems are ones with the greatest diversity. So where's the balance here in terms of astrology and all of
Gotcha.
that?
She's comparing what I'm talking about with ecology and how strength is always in the diversity.
Mhm.
All right. Again, it almost goes back to what I was saying at one of the very first slides. We are naturally non-monogamous. We needed the diversity of the gene pool to survive. Well, how many more people do we need on the planet? And so we as a species may be evolving into what ecology calls quality control.
Okay. All right.
And that means monogamy, because we don't need to keep expanding the species. We need to have a little more selection in how we bring the species onto the planet. So, answer your question?
Kind of. I think you'll probably.
I was going to,
Yeah.
you're jumping my slides.
I'm
No problem. That means I put my slides together in the right order. So these are the 4 words that I have come up with for Pluto and Aquarius. I didn't necessarily create all the words, but detach, objectify, liberate, innovate. So when we have those traumas come up, or we get that Aquarian, Uranian moment that just shocks us, the traffic accident, detaching from the immediacy of a situation. In other words, sometimes with trauma, we're forced out of our bodies to look at it and then come back in the body, hopefully. But you get that point that you've got to be able to step away from the immediacy of something. How many times have you been in an issue and your friend that doesn't have the emotional trigger about it can give you all this information from a detached perspective, and you're like, okay, we all have that happen. So we detach and then objectify. That friend who can objectify and say, well, can you look at it this way? Can you, look at it from a different perspective? And this is Aquarius in general. But with Pluto transiting through Aquarius, I've been telling everybody, this goes beyond sexuality. Whatever you're going through in your world, if you can kind of follow these 4 steps, you can create, you can help your own evolution. So when you can step back and objectify, remember how Aquarius is always about rebellion? Well, rebellion is liberating ourselves from conformity. So when you detach, objectify, it allows you to break free and liberate and change however you need to change. That's the innovate. When you break free from something about your past, how do you fill up the space instead of projecting the past forward again? That's what these are suggesting. And then I can't, talk on the subject without saying the dawning of the Aquarian age. I can't sing, so I won't give you the verse. But we don't exactly know astrologers. Here's where we all got to come together in our own diversity. We all have different ideas of when the Aquarian age is coming, but Pluto always has a 20-year cycle when it transits Aquarius, and it'll be another 250 years before that happens. It is part of the initiation into the Aquarian age. How well can we do the unity and diversity? And how well can we do that, especially from the perspective of sexuality coming off of 7,000 years of sexual distortions and suppression? So you can see how that comes along into the picture as well. So the fixed modality of both of these archetypes can create intense conflicts. Our person earlier said Aquarius is fixed air. The 3 modalities: cardinal, fixed, mutable. Cardinal initiate, fixed sustains, mutable adapts. Aquarius is fixed air. Scorpio, Pluto's ruler, is fixed water. So we got air and water, and we've got, volcanic explosions. Anybody? So from a perspective of sexuality, we can all have pressure that builds up on sexual levels. If you're single, you're responsible for satisfying yourself. Okay, or if you got friends with benefits or whatever Pluto and Aquarius is going to do, yeah, you can go in that. But the point is that when you're in any type of relationship, things are going to build up. And what's happening is sexual issues that have been below the surface, Aquarius, are going to come up. And so can you pay attention to that foresight, that future orientated message? Can you have the conversation with your partner before the argument comes up? And so can you both somehow, or 3 of you or whatever, can you detach and have an objective conversation around it? That can help. If you get those future orientated messages, you can help minimize your own, rehashing of sexual trauma. You can understand if something's going on in your partner maybe a little better. Can we talk about it? How would you like to address it? Okay. Again, we want to try and minimize the pressure that builds up with 2 archetypes in fixed modality. We also will have Pluto sparking Aquarian imagination to all kinds of new sexual intimacies. One of the things that will happen with Aquarius, because it is air, is that we have sex in our head, but we're not really paying attention to the person we're having sex with. And so, again, that expansion in consciousness that we all work to go through. One of the lessons of Pluto and Aquarius is to be able to get out of our head and into our emotional, physical bodies, to get into the senses, and to help Aquarius make new breakthroughs with intimacy. That's going to be one of the beauties of Pluto and Aquarius. You know, you can have, you know, we will hear about distortions of voyeurism. Anybody watching the news of what's his name, the black rap guy that's got the sexual trial going on right now? Yes, yes. There's just an example of the voyeurism for you, and doing it in intense sexual ways. But that can be, again, one of the things that happens with Aquarius. And Aquarius learns to get out of the head and into the body, and really be able to experience intimacy with another, however you are in relationship. Okay. Jeffrey Will Green, quote, he says, one area of liberation to put the role of sexuality back into its proper perspective. Sexuality is a part of life, not the point of life, so to speak. Okay. In other words, it's working kind of, he's quoting it from the Leo polarity of Aquarius, where, you know, Leo, it's all about me, and it has to all be intensified, and, you know, it has to be sex, 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 sex. Aquarius, this transit is going to say sexuality is a natural part of life. Let's make it a natural part of life. Let's not have so much of the consensus distortions and glamorizations that go on. You know, how much more see-through can Hollywood dresses get?
This is the same, I guess I can answer my question on this, but every time that Pluto goes into Aquarius, no matter what the world looks like, well, I guess if humans are here, that they might be going through this situation, including this.
Good question. I'll rephrase it.
Okay.
Is it possible every time Pluto goes through Aquarius, we have to address this kind of stuff? Correct?
Right. I mean, it would be different because 250 years.
Yes, that was my answer. Is that, yep, you did answer the question. Remember what we said? Natural law, observe, correlate, observe, correlate. So we have to look at this transit in context of where we are today. And we are having a very USA conversation. Do you think I could stand up in Afghanistan and give this conversation? Nope, probably wouldn't be here anymore. So it always has to be within context. Which, by the way, if we go back 26,000 years ago to the last Aquarian age, Goddess was alive and well. But we didn't know her as Goddess.
Maybe is there a healthy example of this? Like where you get, well, I don't want to use the word healthy. Never mind.
One more slide and I'm going to get to where you're going, okay? All right. So technology alone, because Aquarius is technology. Technology alone and how our own minds are going to expand through Pluto of Aquarius, we're collectively, as all species, as a species on the planet, but by countries, even in Afghanistan, we're going to expand in consciousness an objective awareness of the religious dogmas going on. It's so distorted from what's natural. You know, you had that phrase, you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time. Cannot fool all the people all the time. That's kind of, an evolution with what Pluto and Aquarius is going to do. It's going to allow us, and an example for you is a family who has a child who comes in and says, I'm gay, or I'm lesbian, or I'm pan. and it shocks the family. I looked this up, the Noel Kidman, Russell Crowe movie about Boy Erased, where they tried to put their young gay son through a conversion therapy, which they still exist in religions, to make him non-gay. Didn't work. Mom finally gave him his freedom to do that. But you know, we are expanding in consciousness. And so we're not going to be able to get away with stuff through Pluto and Aquarius that we could before on sexuality. So we're going to want to release the guilt, atonement, masochistic side around it. Hey, as long as I'm respectful, I have free choice on how I want to participate in relationship. When we release the guilt, anger distortions, that means we don't have to go around raping and having violence as much. So on broad levels and on all of us on an individual level, we'll have our various experiences with that. Point is, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You cannot go back to 1950s Betty Crocker Marble Man. It just not gonna work. Aquarius as an air sign, it has a dehydrating influence. So we can have more issues come up around sexual fluids and sexuality being dehydrated. For men, the lack of sperm, fractured sperm, sterility issues. For women, lack of progesterone, sexual dryness. Okay. We can also see a decreased interest in sexuality. This is where those fixed signs from my previous slide, you know, Pluto has that natural instinct to do it. And Aquarius can sometimes just get up here in its head and not be in the world. And so there will be those that just want to be in their head. And sooner or later, they're going to have some type of Plutonian experience that says, back down to earth. So we'll see variations of that going back and forth for us. Now, we're going to look specifically at the different individual states. I'm down to my last few slides, 15 minutes. Okay, I think I'll make it. I could have put this in earlier. I had it earlier. I moved it. My apologies. This is a basic to Jeffrey Wolf Green's method of evolutionary astrology. And that is those expanding states of awareness. They are not better than or less than. They're expanding in consciousness. And you've got to observe, correlate where somebody's at. You can know this by the conversations you have with different people. And it's just like, I can't talk to them. They just don't understand. You know, if you talk above somebody, they're confused. You talk below somebody, they're bored. One of the things that we teach in EA is how to adjust your language so that you can be heard. I live in Western South Dakota, the Black Hills. It's an absolutely beautiful place. Don't tell anybody. Kristi Noem is telling too many people. She used to be our governor. Gonna lose my track of what I was thinking about. What was I talking about?
People at different levels.
Oh, I live in a conservative state and I live in a conservative city, even though it's very beautiful. I spent years practicing talking to my neighbors about various subjects. Neighbors that, Google listed me as an astrologer. Everybody in the neighborhood found out Kim Marie's an astrologer. It took me a while, but I was able to break the ice with almost all my neighbors. And oh, by the way, in my neighborhood within 3 blocks now, we have 4 gay couples. So anyway, got that one? Okay, consensus. I only got 10 minutes. I got to speed up just a little bit here. Consensus is, again, as we've been talking, they're going to want to continue to suppress any backlashes to that sexual freedoms. 2 genders is what it is. So they're, gonna really fall into perhaps experiencing these various distortions, as you can see on your screen. Question?
Yeah, one of the things that I know that in evolutionary astrology, because we connect Aquarius to the 11th house, the 11th house containing group, right, the group dynamic.
Yep.
And I'm seeing that, this consensus consciousness is very much group in and of itself. And I'm wondering if the Pluto in Aquarius is also activating those consensus to become even stronger.
Totally.
Because they're receiving the same energy.
Totally.
Just
Yep.
thoughts.
Yep, Pluto in Aquarius is going to have the groups that want to go back to the past. Your conservative Republican, those young Republicans, conservative groups out there politically on a basis, what they call, CPAC or whatever they are. And you're going to have the individuated groups that are going to form and get together and want to have their rebellions, their pride marches, which take place even in my small city. And you're gonna have all the groups that are gonna go on in various ways together. So those that want to go back, those that want to move us forward, and you'll have other groups that are just kind of swaying back and forth, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, in their own ways that they form social groups. We got a lot of different social groups in this country. You'll see them hit the news. So I'm going to just move on. Some of this may be castration complex. This comes out of the Garden of Eden myth. Women are trying to get men. They're the temptations. And so we'll, have some of that gender equality that still wants to pop up in the consensus world, that men and women are not equal. You've seen the little things about the trad wife coming back into social consciousness and conservative circles, that kind of stuff. So in that consensus world, from being able to detach and liberate, they still have an ability to have deep conversations around sexual issues in non-judgmental ways. Don't want to lambast consensus consciousness. We all have families and family members that are consensus. They still, again, can have those deep conversations. And especially if they have family members who are sexually exploring in all those different ways. It shocks family members, and some of them reject it, but some of them can go, well, wait a minute. I have a brother-in-law who's my niece, Gen Z, came out pan, and she's just graduated from college. She's been exploring back and forth all the way. Her father in the tech world, when she first expressed it to them, and they're very religious. And so now they say, we're spiritual, Kim, we're not religious. Anyway, when he found that out about his daughter, he works in this big tech company. He made it a point to start going out to lunch with anybody in the office who was sexually variable and said, help me understand. Proud of him. Proud of him. Yeah. We probably did. He's a very sweet guy, but he opened up to it rather than doing his church rejection of it. So we were all very happy with him. Individuating, that 20%, these are going to be those rebels. Okay. And that can even be, I don't need sex. They can still have all the distortions here. They can go into being overly sexual instead of creating real intimacy. And what they want to really do is have that freedom to explore however they instinctively want to in a mutually respectful way. Yeah. Go ahead.
So you're saying like the people, that 20% that is pushing for sexual freedom may not be themselves like engaging in those experiences, but they're still fighting.
They can. Yep.
expand that.
Yep, they can fight the expansion of it. And you can have the individuated states of consciousness in this Pluto Aquarius transit. They could move into a very committed relationship. They can move into a committed two-gender relationship. They can do a committed throuple to commitment however they want. So they can have, you can still have the distortions in the individuated state. You're going to have it in the spirituated state. Next slide. But you can have the distortions individuating because of all the human-made conditioning for the last 6,000-7,000 years. All right. But these can be the ones that really want to start on the bottom, learning new sexual healing modalities, exploring Tantra and its raising of the Kundalini. So from the natural law perspective, from the evolutionary perspective of Tantra, it's expanding consciousness. And sexuality is part of it, but it is utilized to expand consciousness. We have some of what we call patriarchal Tantra, where it's just like, you know, how many variations can you go into, you know, or sometimes the intensity physically, but there's nothing there emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So there can be this that will start to come up, and raising Kundalini is opening all the chakras. Okay. Making sense? Okay, I got my 5 minutes. So spirituated consciousness, this is where they're going to really want to try to understand the other person. Who are they mentally? Aquarius. Who are they emotionally? Pluto, ruler of Scorpio. How do I really understand them so that we can mutually give and receive on deep connected levels? Really practicing, again, the Tantra, natural Tantra and Kundalini. This is where we will also, you could do this in the individuated state, you can do it in consensus, but it becomes more and more conscious too. How can we heal these sexual traumas together? Can we do role playing with each other? Distortions in that spirituated state, promoting oneself as a sexual healer in manipulative ways. Okay, that's the most obvious one that will want to come up. But you know, this is where we want that freedom here to explore deeply connecting with another person. And I will do it in however we have to do the role playing. If you go back to that anima animus in Cancer Capricorn, in healthy relationship, when someone's triggered, one partner becomes the adult, the other partner becomes the child, and they work to heal. And then they go back to an adult to adult relationship, flipping that back and forth. And even being able to open up about that sexually and being able to talk about it, to express it, to explore, to do the sexual role playing with one another, however your various circumstances present themselves. Because again, we are all sexual beings and we all need sexual healing. And so if you look at this, you know, even from that consensus individuated spirituated states of consciousness, we can all tap into understanding this. You wouldn't be in this room if you couldn't. So you all have these opportunities here. All right. Questions. I did put up, no, I used that one again. And I went through my definitions, but you'll have to look at the PDFs if you want. The PDFs are all available to you online, as you know, that you can download them if you want to. And this is me. This is, you can't see the phone number, 605-348-5111, evolutionaryastrology.net. And I do free new moon, full moon podcasts. And I also do a lot of webinars. One of my astrology loves is forecasting, hence the podcast. But you know, Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries. I got to go home and do Jupiter in Cancer. You can find our forecasting webinars on our website and our YouTube channel that's listed there. Final questions or comments? Go ahead.
Are you gonna be here and are you doing any readings while you're here? Are you gonna stay through the rest of the conference or you leave?
I'm here through the conference. Sunday, Sunday I'm going to do basic astrology. I'm going to do the cycle of phases and aspects. It is interpretation, and it's the foundations of interpretations that aspects are built upon. I brought my husband this time, so I can set up a session for when I get home. Okay. Yeah. And you can come find me. I did bring my calendar. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just kind of commenting on the fact that Saturn is going to Aries this weekend, and so knowing that the consensus kind of is operated and kind of influenced by Saturn, like maybe that will kind of paint a picture of how that consensus group is going to enact their visions and their desires on to that individuated group, maybe a little bit more like an Aries.
Yeah.
Just kind of scary a little bit.
Yeah. I'm kind of looking forward to Saturn and Neptune and Aries. I think we need a little rebellion on the planet, not the types we're seeing. Sir?
Yeah, I like the way that you pointed out that the Pluto and Aquarius and the whole area of sexuality, the focus on it is really only part of the big picture.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of problems with violence in our society and actually the entire planet, and the motives and goals and reasonings and all that. And frustration, the term you used, anger, various things that apply to suppressed sexuality.
Yes.
Is such a big part of this.
Yeah.
And people discontent with themselves and not being able to release who they are. Yeah, is a big cause of frustration and eventually violence.
Yeah. Our religious patriarchal distortions, root cause of sexual violence.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.